day, the boy's daddy decided he'd give them $100 apiece and let them go out by themselves and see what they'd do with it. Told them to be gone 1 year and then come back so he could see which one of them made the best of his money. Well, the 3 of them set out together down the big road. Then Will says, "Now, when we come to where the road, we're up about to go, don't to Jersey board." Now, when we come to where the road forks 3 ways, we'll separate. There ain't no use in all of us going together. So when they came to the crossroad, they stopped and talked a while, and directly Will called Tom off to one side, and they went to whisper. Then they both came back over to Jack and throwed him down and took every cent of his money, divided it, and left Jack laying there. Will took one side of the road, and Tom, he took the other, and Jack got his senses back pretty soon and sat there a little while studying what he's going to do, and then he decided he'd go and see what luck he might have. So he walked out into the middle of the crossroads and throwed up his hat in the air. And whichever road it landed in, he was going to go that way. Well, his hat landed right in the road straight ahead. So he took it and he went. It was an old road, not traveled very much, and pretty soon Jack landed out in a lonesome wilderness of a place. Went on and went on. The road pretty nearly covered up with grass and briars, and directly he came to a fine-looking white house. Jack could see the signs of somebody a-living there, and he had to give some place to stay that night. He hated to holler because he was so ragged and dirty, but he allowed there was nothing like trying, so he hollered, "Hello?" and waited a while, but nobody came out, so he went to the door and pulled on the doorbell.
Ding dong.
The door opened, and a big cat came out. Jack didn't know what to think of that. Cat sat there just looking at him, and there didn't seem to be no person come to the door, so Jack hollered again, "Who keeps the house?" "Cat and mouse," says the cat. "Allow me," says Jack, "I've done got to a country where cats can talk." "Why, yes," the cat told him. "There's no witch out here. She's got all my family but me and my sister. She witched her into a cat, and then a mouse, and me into a cat. She'll try to witch me into a mouse tonight." And Jack looked, and he saw a mouse creep out one side of the door. Says, "Well, is there anything I can do to keep that old witch from bothering you?" "Probably might be," says the cat. "You can help me, but my sister, she'll stay a mouse. There can't be nothing done for you once you get to a mouse. You stay here by the door tonight and kill any kind of the big varmint you see, and it'll keep the witch off." Well, Jack got him a big club and got before the door, and when it got plumb thick, dark, all sorts of bears and painters and big white animals, they came up the steps, and Jack and knocked them and beat them with his club and kept them fighting all night. Well, the next morning the cat came out, and it was a little bigger, and it looked a little bit like a girl. "Now tonight," she says, "that old witch will send a middle size of varmints, and you can see if you can keep them off too." Well, Jack picked around next day, and he got him some berries and such, and what he could eat, and cut up a middle-sized club, and then it commenced to get dark, and he got by the door again. Then all kinds of pies and snakes and wildcats and weasels and boomers and groundhogs came and tried to get in, and Jack, he hit him with the club and knocked him off the porch and kept on giving it to him till daylight. Then the door opened, and that girl came out. She was pretty near the right size that time, but she still had some signs of a cat's claws and whiskers and ears. She says to Jack, "You done fine last night, Jack. Now tonight she'll send all sorts of little varmints. You'll have a time of it, I expect." So Jack, he ate a few blackberries and huckleberries that day and whittled him out some paddles and swatters and took up his stand by the door. Then the night came. And all sorts of pies and scorpions and insects and spiders and hornets and big ants come up and tried to cross the door. Said, but Jack, well, he went to work with his swatters and paddles, and it was a sight in the world how he went after them. He thought there'd be a big pile of dead things there when it got daylight, but when it got light enough for him to see, there wasn't a thing on the porch. Then the door opened, and there stood the prettiest girl you ever looked at. "You did real well, Jack," she says. "You come on in the house now, and I'll fix you something to eat." She baked Jack some cornbread and fixed him some coffee, and while he was eating, she said to him, "Now don't you have nothing to contend with tonight but that old witch herself. You got shed of all the plagues she had. Now when she comes in, you be sure not to let her do anything in the world for you. I'll hide, and you and that old witch can go too. You remember now, if you let her do one thing for you, she'll witch us both into cats." So that night the girl went and hid somewhere, and Jack, he found him a needle and thread, and he pulled up before the fire, and he went to patching his old raggedy coat, and it wasn't long until that ugly old wrinkled up woman came hobbling up to the door. Looked like she's about 100 years old. Her nose and her chin was so long and they hung down just a wobbling. Well, she got a chair and she pulled it up close to Jack, and she said, "Howdy do, Jack." "Let me do that for you, Jack. It looks so awkward seeing a man trying to patch." "No," says Jack, "I'll do my own patching." The old witch looked sort of outdone, but she kept right on, and directly he got up to fix him a little supper, got some meal in a pan and started mixing bread. "Let me do that for you, Jack. I never did like to see a man try to make bread." "No," says Jack, "I can fix bread all right." Then he went to the fire, raked him out some coals, and set the skillet over, and then he cut up some meat, and it started to fry. "Let me tend that meat for you, Jack. I never saw anything so awkward as a man trying to cook." "No, thank you, ma'am," says Jack. "I don't want you a-messing with my meat. I'll tend to it myself." Well, then Jack turned around to get his bread, and that old witch got hold of a knife and went to turn Jack meats over. There was an old flesh fork a-hanging there, a big old fork they used to cook meat on. Jack grabbed that up and ran at the old woman with it and hooked her and rammed her right into the fire. He held her down there between the back log and the forestick, and such a crackling and a popping and a frying and a singeing you never heard. Jack kept her there until she just burned off. Then there stood that girl just a-laughing, and she says, "You sure got her then, Jack. There'll not be no more witchery done around here." So she fixed Jack a nice supper, and the next morning, when they went out, that place was just full of fine livestock, chickens and hogs and sheep and cattle and horses, and the road was cleared out and the crops all standing in the fields. That girl says to Jack, "Everything here belongs to you now, Jack, for killing that witch." "You too?" says Jack. "Well, yes, if you say so." "I'll sure say so," says Jack. "You're the main part of the property." So they went and they got 2 fine horses and hitched them up to the surrey and went to the store, and Jack got a new suit of clothes And then they found him a preacher and they got married. Well, Jack went to work about the place, attending his crops and his livestock. And that young woman, she cooked and did the washing and the milking and the churning and all. Then Jack got to studying how the year was about up. So he told the young girl about how he and Will and Tom had started out. And they said they'd better fix up pretty soon and go back and see his daddy. So they got ready and they pulled out with the team and the buggy and one morning. And so Jack got on his old clothes, throwed them in under the seat. That girl had a pet possum, and they took it along too. They came inside of Jack's house and he said to her, "Now you wait here a minute. I want to go see what all's done happened while I've been gone, see if Will and Tom's got back yet." Then he put on his old raggedy clothes and he put that fox under his arm. It was a fox possum, actually. It was part fox and part possum, but it looked a lot like a possum. His father saw him coming and came to the gate and says, "Well, hello, Jack. Glad to see you. You look like you must not have had any luck. I see you got on the same suit of clothes." "Will and Tom come home yet?" Jack asked him. "Yep, they got here early this morning. They got new clothes and both of them married nice-looking women. You wait here, Jack, and let me go get you one of my suits of clothes so you'll have something better to wear when you come in." "No," says Jack, "I'll just go ahead like I am." So he went on in the house, and when Will and Tom saw him in the same old raggedy overalls and a coat, they commenced to laughing and making fun of him, and their wives slipped around and pinned dish rags to his coattails. Jack didn't pay him no mind. He talked to his daddy and his mama while every now and then he'd squeeze down on that fox possum and he'd say, "Gold enough, but none for you." Will and Tom, they couldn't understand that. Then directly Jack went on back where he'd left his wife. He got on his good new suit of clothes, and then him and his wife drove the surrey on down the gate, hitched the horse up, and Jack took the pet fox possum under his arm. Will looked out and saw him and said, "Well, who's that?" Tom came and looked and said, "Ain't nobody we know. It's rich folks. What you reckon they want?" The wives came and peeked around the door, and about that time Jack's mother looked out the window and said, "Well, that's Jack." "No," says Will, "why, that can't be Jack." "Yes, it is too, Will," Tom said. "It is Jack, and look what a pretty fine dressed woman he's got." "Lie on me," says Will's wife. "It'll not do her for her to see me this way," and she ran and hid under the bed. Then Tom gave his wife a shove and says, "Now you run and hide somewhere quick. Don't you let her see you in that old cotton dress." And she jumped off the porch and crawled in under the house. Jack brought his wife on in and made her known to his daddy and mama, and Will and Tom just stood around. Finally, Jack's wife said to him, "I thought Jack told me you boys was married. Where's your wives at?" "Well, mine's under the bed," says Will. "She can come out if she wants to." She crawled out from under the bed, had feathers and dust in her hair. Then Jack's woman asked if the other one was home. And Tom's wife, she scrambled out from under the floor with her hair full of trash and dirt all over. Jack's wife spoke nice to him, and they all talked on a while. Jack squeezed down on that fox possum. Directly it said, "Gold enough, but none for you." And by that time, Will and Tom knowed what it meant. Well, Jack took his daddy and mama on back with him and his wife, and they was all independent rich. Will and Tom never did do much good, and Jack and his wife and his folks, they lived happy. The end.